Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Things are moving fast right now in Rostermania. Pred confirming on stream last night that his contract is signed. It's a done deal for next season, wherever he might potentially go. But also an update on FaZe. Coach Crowder saying on stream that they've taken a risk here with their fourth player that seems to now be locked in based on the clip we're about to dive into. Does this mean Scrappy, Ghosty, Sib? What option is a good risk? Very much interested to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into. First of all, I actually wanted to mention a couple of clips that I saw the other day on the FaZe story that I haven't really got a chance to mention yet. So I think we'll dive into it now. Because Crowder and Cellium gave some thoughts on stream with JoeDeceives the other day on the Slasher situation. Of course, they've parted ways. Slasher's going a different direction. They're looking at another alternative that we'll get into. But it's pretty interesting their comment on Slasher as a teammate, how much he helped them actually last season, but also what Crowder says, that he really likes Slasher. I mean, they were together as coach-player combinations back in the 100 Thieves days, even way back in Black Ops 4. So Crowder knew what they were getting into last season, and I think a lot of things Slasher probably did correctly, but it seems based on these words at least, that it wasn't necessarily a chemistry thing, it was more so role dynamics on the team that they wanted to fix. And Crowder actually says, in quite an interesting way to be honest, that the team needs to take a lot of accountability for the way that things went wrong last year in terms of they didn't get the results they wanted. Yes, they won an event, they made a couple of grand finals, they had plenty of top 3 placements, but that's still not what FaZe are aiming for. The strength of that trio, they can't, it's a trio that can't win one event over 2 seasons. And Crowder says, they're like, look, they can't put any blame on Slasher. He did all he could do. They as a trio have to take a significant amount of blame for maybe the way that they played as like an individual players and some of the struggles they had. Of course, many fans would love to be in FaZe's position, making all these finals, right? If you're a fan of a team that is in FaZe, you'd probably think, damn, what are these guys moaning about? They're constantly top 3, always there on Sunday, and that's great, but, when you're FaZe, you always want a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, MC, he was your AR duo. Obviously, you remember them a lot. Like, what were your thoughts on Team with Austin this year?
This year, I mean, I forget who I told it, but I said, like, this year was the most prepped year I've ever had, like, most prepped and, like, most fun year I've ever had, like, practicing and stuff. Like, obviously in core we won a lot, but I feel like core we just like out talented everybody. But this year, like I felt a lot more prepped going into matches and like tournaments and stuff like that. So, and Austin was a huge part of that too. So I want to shout out him for that because he was actually gross and like he played his role really well, for like the thing we wanted him to do. So
just like anything that you've ever heard about him, like attitudes wise, I feel like is like such bullshit now. At least from my perspective, I feel like he was one of the best teammates you could really ever ask for. And like working with him from a coaching perspective was like really good too. Like he did everything that like the team wanted him to do, to be honest. Like I thought he was a really good teammate. I thought he helped the players get better. I think him being on the team for this year helps all the players pursue their career farther. Like I think he did nothing but help us in that sense. So like I enjoyed having him on the team. I liked him a lot. I was definitely upset that like we were probably making this change in the sense of that for that reason, but I also do think like this roster wasn't fully clicking. And again, I don't think that's fully on Austin either. I'll say that publicly, obviously, even with MC here. Like I don't think it was just fully on Austin. We all talked about that when we had the team talk too. Like I don't think this change, like whoever we pick up, it's gonna be like, oh, it's a magic fix. Like I do think we have to get better as a team as well, like from within too a little bit. And I think that's the only way we're gonna start winning at the level we want to. And I think that's a really big way to look at it too. But yeah, I thought Austin was amazing. I think he absolutely deserves a really good spot next year with a really good team. And I think he did everything we asked him to do.
So of course you'd expect them to give him a lot of credit, Slasher, on his way out the door of the team. He obviously did a good job for them. They won with him this season, and they clearly like him on an individual level, at least it seems that way. So, it's interesting to hear that point of view. Now, they're not going to say, oh, Slasher, terrible teammate, no one should pick him up, this guy's awful, because first of all, that's not true, but also you don't, slander your teammate after he's left before he's found a new team. Generally, at least. There's been a few circumstances where that's occurred, but usually when a player is parting ways, you'll gas them up so they can get another opportunity. So always take some things with a grain of salt, but I think Slasher did a good job, especially towards the end of the year when he was arguably their best player for the last couple of events. Major 5 and Champs had like a 1.3 or something at a pretty remarkable end of the season. But he's looking for a next step. We saw earlier today there was a rumor that Slasher, Ghosty, Envoy, Snoopy was meant to be a team before over at Boston. Envoy has seemingly turned that down to go to Toronto, but if Scrappy gets bought out by FaZe, then Envoy might reconsider. But that's an interesting potential duo there there, Slasher and Ghosty. We'll talk about Ghosty in regards to FaZe here in just a couple of seconds, but I do wonder whether Slasher could still end up on Boston if they are looking to build a competitive team. Building around Slasher is certainly not a bad idea. If they were thinking about building around Clay, there was a rumor that went around a couple of weeks ago, then Slasher's another player in a similar position that probably has another couple of years in the tank and is playing at a higher level, it's got to be said, over the last couple of seasons. Let's talk though FaZe's replacement for Slasher. There's plenty of options, but there isn't really that many options. I mean, they can't get Pred, it seems, because we're going to talk in a second that he's going to OpTic, and it narrows down the field of players that are FaZe caliber to some extent. Octane could have been a good one, but he's retired. Scrappy is certainly a player that you would have to consider. If you don't consider Scrappy, I don't know what you're thinking, but still, is he available from Toronto? Seems unlikely. I feel like we'd have heard something, you know, with all the leaks that have come out over the last few days, I feel like we'd have heard something about Toronto looking to either sell or some indication that this was going to happen if already these engagements and these relationships and these discussions have got down to the point where this is almost a done deal. I just can't imagine it is FaZe Scrappy, because if it is, they've kept things very impressively quiet on all fronts. So what other options are there to look at then from the FaZe perspective? There's a few players. Sib would be the obvious one really remaining, right? A player that he's been on FaZe before a couple of years ago as a substitute, a very solid player. Crowder gassed him up pretty hard the other day, and Crowder turns the stream on and says on stream that FaZe's fourth is effectively a good risk. He texts the, pretty much, right, he texts the player to Merc and Maven, and then Merc comments, yeah, I actually really like that for you guys, and he's like, yeah, it's a risk, but they reckon it's a risk worth taking. This, of course, heavily implies they've got the fourth. It's pretty much locked in, they know who it's going to be, and the deal is going to get done in short order with the players.
I love this, Chris. I love what you just told me.
Not bad, right? Definitely a
dying.
risk. Definitely a risk, but
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I just looked too. It's a picture of a dog. His mid to face.
oh my god.
So what player joining this roster would, in your opinion, constitute a good risk? Because, okay, any of the players we've mentioned in some sense are risky in some form or another. Like, you bring Scrappy in, there's no guarantees it works, but, you know, the team would be so good on paper that I'm not even sure that's a risk, right? Really, compared to what you could have. Like, compared to what FaZe, like, the ceiling of this FaZe roster with a fourth is probably where they would be with Scrappy, to be honest. I'm not even sure that getting that is a risk necessarily. It seems more likely that Sib is a bit more of a risk, because if you bring Sib in alongside these guys, there's no guarantee that you've got great comms on that roster. We already know that as a trio, Simp, aBeZy, Cell don't have the greatest comms in general. Slasher is a leader for sure, but he's not necessarily a communication leader as a guy like a Ghosty might be. So a Ghosty would be an interesting option here for FaZe that of course has been floated around. I've never been convinced they would do that, and I still am of that opinion, to be honest. I mean, he's been in discussions with Boston, it seems, and with other rosters, but he has, it's got to be said, Ghosty, playing a lot with Simp and aBeZy over the last couple of days. He's been playing all sorts of games with these guys, like various different things, only up, etc, etc. And there was even this that people were noticing here. Frosty does a tweet, Simp responds, Ghosty responds, so there have been a bit of a, you know, back and forth between all these guys over the last couple of days, and maybe that's a possibility. And I think bringing in Ghosty would constitute a risk in some respects, right? He's only been in the CDL for some time. He certainly could be a good option for FaZe, but you know, I think it would be a risky one, as would Sib. But there's always risk with any roster decision you make, so it's difficult to exactly say what Crowder's getting at there. But I think the interesting thing really is that it's pretty much done as far as he's concerned, based on that evidence. That it makes sense, right? I mean, we're a few days into this period now where rosters can be constructed. FaZe will have for sure a very good idea what they want to do, and this might well be it. The other piece we've got to talk about then is the OpTic Texas side, because they seem closer than anybody to getting this sorted, but maybe Drazah is another risk. I mean, in theory, Drazah would be a risk that is probably worth taking for FaZe, but it is nonetheless a risk. Like, those guys, aBeZy, Drazah, don't get on so well. You can't guarantee that the chemistry is going to be there between that team if things start to go wrong. That would also be a risk. And Drazah is not locked in with OpTic yet. We believe there is one player that is locked in, though. I mean, Dashy is locked in, Shotzzy is locked in, Pred, we're pretty sure now, is locked in. The rumor that was emerging, though, just a few minutes ago, actually, from this Intel OpTic account, and compared to some of the other Intel accounts, this account doesn't have the strongest track record, but nonetheless has been right on a couple of things over the last couple of days, at least to our understanding, and he says the following: as we all reported, Pred and Drazah are the desired OpTic Texas acquisitions. Pred has signs. Drazah is currently in a conflict between FaZe and OpTic, with each team having their own positives. If OpTic don't get Drazah, Sib is likely the next target. So this might be the battle here between FaZe and OpTic, because if FaZe can't get Scrappy, as I don't think they're going to be able to, let's be honest, they might go all out for Drazah, which makes sense. Like, if you're FaZe, can you look over at OpTic and see them get Pred and Drazah, and you got neither of those guys? Maybe they didn't want Pred in the first place, and Simp didn't want to go to a flex, but still, if you're FaZe and you let OpTic get both Drazah and Pred, it feels like you've lost out on Rostermania, right? Especially if you get stuck with Sib, which is definitely not a bad thing. Sib's a great player, but maybe he doesn't fit the ideal mold of the player you'd want in that position like potentially Drazah would. So FaZe might just be going all out here to try and get Drazah to change his mind and not join OpTic after all. So that's a very interesting possibility. Might not be the case. All these discussions can change rapidly, but I will just share here from, well, Pred. There actually, unfortunately, isn't anything to share. He was on stream last night, and his stream was having some glitching issues or something that people could hear him, I'm guessing, at the time, but all of the Twitch clips here just have no audio at all. I've tried everything to get it, but it just seemingly doesn't exist. So you guys can see the stream lagging and chopping up all over the place here. So Pred was talking about the stuff, and look, we know that even yesterday we talked about a clip from Pred where he said that within 2 hours he's going to sign the deal, and basically what he said on stream last night was he's put pen to paper, he's signed the deal as expected. So I think this is pretty, you know, I haven't actually heard the audio from the clip, but everyone who watched it said that that's basically what he said, that he's locked in the deal, and I can't imagine that's anywhere else but OpTic, thanks to, I believe it was Omar who pointed this one out to me overnight. So it sets up some really interesting couple of days here where Pred has probably signed the OpTic contract. That seems pretty much now locked in. But the fourth for OpTic in Drazah, this is also what Jacob Hell said right the other day. He said, well, Pred is almost a guarantee, 99%, and maybe now 100%, right? We're not going to know for sure until OpTic confirm it, but they probably won't confirm it until they know their fourth player, which is now not guaranteed. So potentially FaZe tried to get Scrappy, that's fallen through, and now they're going to try all out to get Drazah. But if, you know, what Crowder said is correct, seems like they've got someone locked in. So it's going to be interesting. I'm sure that probably tonight and tomorrow morning, we're going to have more idea what are the next developments in this saga. But it's definitely been a wild Rostermania period, right? It's been certainly crazier, I think, than even I expected. And, you know, that comes in a period where I was expecting many changes, right? Just to close out the video from this, I thought was interesting from Brian Stats here. Highest average placement in CDL only history. Simp, aBeZy, and Cell all topping it at 2.48. Many FaZe fans will say, damn, you know, only like 6-7 event wins with this kind of average placement. But still, many fans would love to be in this position. iLLeY, though, 3.6. This is, of course, including the OpTic Texas, but also the Dallas Empire days back in the day, which is, of course, look, these numbers don't probably mean that much in the grand scheme of things in terms of how good players actually are, but it's obvious why iLLeY's going to get a spot back in the league, and probably a pretty good one next year. Shotzzy, Insight, Envoy. I think the Hicksy just misses out on this because he hasn't played enough events to be counted, right? Play is just outside of this, I think, at number 16, but, you know, Scump's here, even Kremp, despite the absolute shambolic start of the Vanguard season right on New York Subliners, still is here at 4.24. So very much enjoyed to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.